What is up, production fam? This is Get Quick, Get Sick Quick Tips coming at you today with a couple of techniques to help you make your hats feel more lively and more interesting overall. Let's go ahead and listen to what we're getting into. Cool, so this is a trap drop and it feels woefully inadequate without hi-hats, so let's go ahead and get some in there. And the first thing I want to show you is how to give your offbeat hat a little bit more life. Now what the offbeat is normally that spot equidistant between your kick and your backbeat, or I should say your downbeat and your backbeat, so your kick and your snare. Equidistant is going to be right here, and that offbeat is something that we've been listening to for about 100 years. To give drums a really bouncy, disco-y sort of sensation. It is the cymbal that goes equidistant between those two spots. Check it out. Just like that. Now, if you think about how to beatbox music, for instance, particularly house music, you don't go boot and cat and boot and cat. It's plural boots and plural cats. Boots and cats and boots and cats and boots and cats. And the offbeat is that sk, 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 boots, cat, boots, cat. Without it, the music won't necessarily hop in the way that we need it to. So, totally acceptable to take your offbeat or your open hat or your ride or your laser or your little chappy hey, hey, hey kind of sound, whatever it might be, and just put it like this as I've done in that space equidistant between your kick and snare, like so. However, it can feel a little bit static and a little bit stale when you do things this way, and I encourage you to create life in your music. Now, if you think about the way a drummer is playing drums, they can make, with 2 sticks and 1 cymbal that opens and closes, all of these different tones. They could be like, and the way they're able to get all that kind of variety and change in life out of the cymbal is dependent on where they're hitting it with the stick, how hard they're hitting it, how open the cymbal is, and they're playing volume and they're playing pitch into the sound. And that's going to make the whole cymbal feel far more lively and interesting to the ear over time. We can replicate a lot of those minute changes to the cymbal by playing the cymbal in a sampler. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take our offbeat, our open hat sound, and I'm going to drop it into a sampler, upgrade that with a right click to a sampler, and put a center C on the position that my offbeat should be. That C3 is going to play our sample back exactly as we've deposited it into the sampler. And if we solo it, this is what we got going on in here. Cool. Now, I like to do a couple of things to this in my sampler. I'm going to set my voices to 1. I'm just going to turn that back up to 0 dB. So that way we're not, losing any volume with our sound here. Now, to give this hat that expressiveness in the volume that I was just talking about, I'm going to group the whole thing and map my ADSR, my attack, my decay, my sustain, and my release to macros 1 through 4, A to 1, D to 2, S to 3, etc., etc. And now with the centralized control panel all macroed up over here, by pulling down our sustain, we can make the sound feel, you guessed it, less sustained, a little bit tighter, a little bit more closed. And if we automate this to open up and down, we can create a back and forth kind of tick-tock between the 2 cymbals. Now, that's one way of doing this, but I prefer doing it this way. Pull your sustain all the way down, and then use your decay's openness or closedness to create this more closed or more open kind of sound. Cool, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create an impulse and an accent beat. Now, sometimes the impulse, where the drummer is really putting the weight of their hit, is on the first hit of the bar. Sometimes it's the second hit of the bar. It's up to us to decide where that hit is going to be. In this case, I think I'm going to make the more open, the more powerful impulse hit be on the back offbeat. Let's check it out in the context of our kick and snare. Cool, so you can hear how there's a little bit of variety there, and if we took this whole idea and duplicated it over and made a change that it happened the second time around slightly differently, perhaps our final hit here is quite open with our decay. Or perhaps this one's a little bit tighter. There we go. Cool. So now we start we've got this kind of shuffle, this back and forth movement in the hats. Something else that we can do to make the hats have even more expressiveness is slightly play the pitch. Inside of your modulation parameter on the sampler, we can use LFO2 here, which is going to let us tie it to a lot of different destinations, and I'm going to set LFO2 up to behave randomly by selecting a random LFO here. Now, by leaving retrigger on, that means every time this hits, it's going to trigger at a different random value, sometimes 100, sometimes 80, sometimes 90. Whatever it is, it's always going to be a different random value, and I'm going to send that to our sample's pitch. Now, if I go up all the way, it's going to sound kind of whack and kind of watery and kind of all over the place, where every one of these hits is ever so slightly different in pitch, which doesn't feel like a real cymbal at all. So 100% is obviously too much with the parameters amount, but I'd say we dial it in less than like 5%, just some small minute amount, and that way every hit is going to be ever so slightly variable. Now, that's one thing that we can do. We can also set this so that as the hit is we can also set this so that we control it too. For instance, if I want to set this to a square rate and then pick the rate that we are playing at here, which would pretty much be a bar, we can set this so that every other hit going by a bar parameter is going to be higher or lower in pitch, because this is happening regularly. So that could work too. It's kind of however you want it to be. All right, well, hopefully this tutorial on how to make your offbeat feel a little bit more expressive and move a little bit more interestingly was helpful to you. And if it was, check out the next follow-up video, which is all about hat flourishes and playing the closed trap hi-hat. See you there.